Hello. The picture which introduced this morning's R&R is by Rembrandt and is his interpretation of the story which is related by Luke in the reading we will hear in a moment. The reading is so familiar that you could probably recite it almost from memory. But in case you can't, I'll ask Deirdre to read it for us.
Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and travelled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms round him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. The slave replied, 'Your brother has come. Your father has killed the fatted calf because he's got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you. I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'"
The painting inspired the theologian Henri Nouwen, I'm never sure that I pronounce his name correctly, to meditate on the story of the prodigal son. He stared at the picture for 2 whole days when it was on display in a gallery in St. Petersburg, and he then wrote a wonderful, highly readable short book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, which I would thoroughly recommend. When this story was read to us as children, I imagine we all took it at its superficial level, as children do, and as the parent who read it to them probably did too. Naughty, ungrateful son wants his share of his father's estate right away so that he can go off, forsake all responsibility to his family and spend, which he duly did. Like many a young man, he hadn't thought things through at all. He imagined that this large sum of money would last forever. He had no experience of budgeting and little of the pitfalls of being seen to have money to burn. As adults, we can all too easily imagine the different ways in which the young man squandered his inheritance. As children, we may have wondered what the pig's pods, husks I think they were called when it was read to me as a child, tasted like. Drier than pods, I think. Anyway, not as nice as Cocoa Pops. We followed the destitute wastrel as he made his miserable journey back to the family farm, rehearsing his grovelling speech to his dad as he went. Was he really repentant, or did he want his bread buttered on both sides? We were amazed at the father's unequivocal forgiveness of the lad, and at the feast which he commanded in celebration of the son's return. We had every sympathy with the elder boy, who was more than jealous. He felt he was the victim of his father's injustice. Or was the old man simply addled? The two sons are not quite the two-dimensional characters we might have assumed them to be when we heard the story for the first time. I suppose the prodigal is easier to categorise than his older dutiful brother. The prodigal needs to break loose, perhaps because he is the younger son. In Jewish society, and until relatively recently in ours too, the eldest child inherited the bulk of his parents' estate when they died, and not surprising that it caused resentment. A shrewd move, some might say, to take whatever was due to him as soon as he could and enjoy it well away from the family home, where he would always be low down in the pecking order. He could have done something useful with his share, bought some land, started farming on his own account, used his father's money productively. Instead, he blows the lot on things which will give him only the most ephemeral of pleasures. He soon finds out who loves him for himself. No one in his new life, it appears. His descent into destitution is predictable and rapid. The journey back home painful both physically and emotionally. To put it in an American nutshell, he's messed up big time. He can scarcely believe the welcome his father gives him, the fuss he makes of him, the absolute forgiveness his father extends to him. Just look at Rembrandt's painting again. The father clasps his errant son to his breast in delight and relief that he is back. Disbelief is the elder son's reaction to all this. It isn't fair. He's never asked for anything for himself. He's worked alongside his father, contributing to the family fortune, some of which was given to his younger brother. The emotions which rise within him are not attractive, even though we may think them justified. Jealousy, resentment, maybe even animosity towards his brother. The perfect son now explodes in rage, and we see another side of him. Be honest, in his position, wouldn't we feel the same? Does he have any sense of the deep hurt that his brother caused his father? Can he not master his baser emotions and share the joy that the family is complete again? It's a lot to ask, I know. We would probably struggle. And then there's the father. Clearly his elder son is like him, hard-working, sensible, a thoroughly decent chap. But what the elder son cannot share with him is fatherhood. You never know what fatherhood or motherhood feels like until it happens to you. The father must have been deeply wounded by the prodigal's demand, because that's how it reads, for his share of the estate. I can't wait till you're dead, Dad. I don't want to work with you and live with you. I want fun, and I want it now, while I'm young enough to enjoy it. You can just imagine some fathers, perhaps even most fathers, faced with a demand like that, saying, "On your bike, son. You can go, but you'll not get a penny from me." But not this father. Probably with a heavy heart, he gives his younger son his whole share. As the boy sets off laden with cash, his father imagines he will never see him again. The loss of the boy hurts far more than the loss of the money. To lose a child is one of the most painful things that can happen to a parent. God knows that, from personal experience, even though it was a temporary loss. News of the prodigal's return reaches his father before the boy himself. His father is beside himself with joy. He expresses it with a long embrace, an embrace which carries the full weight of his Father's love and forgiveness. The feast is a material expression of the Father's delight. There's no mention in Jesus' narrative of the boy later being consigned to a servant's position, as he was willing to be. He is fully restored to his former status, his misdeeds forgotten as though they had never been. I'm not telling you anything new, am I? We all know that the Father is Jesus' illustration of God, who gives everything, expecting nothing in return. When we take what he gives, and everything we have comes from God, but do not return his love, separating ourselves from him and going our own way, I think it hurts God. I said a few weeks ago that I've come to understand that God doesn't need us, but he does want us to love him as he loves us, because loving God is the ideal state for a human being. Only when you love him can you be aware of his far deeper love for you. When we stray, as we almost all do, his delight when we return to him is unbounded, because finding God is like waking from death and into new life, life in all its fullness. His forgiveness when we ask for it is total. All our misdeeds, all the times when God did not rule in our hearts, are forgotten, as if they had never been. It's good to hear this story again. If ever you feel far from God, remember he is only a few words away. Father, forgive me. Can I come home to you? No sooner asked than granted, with tears of joy on the face of God, who always wants to gather his children to him, because that's where we belong. Goodbye.